right now. They've got good overall packages, and for the likes of Ray, Razgatlioglu and Reading, pretty much everywhere we go, they have been able to get themselves to the front.
Nothing to choose between Ray and Razgatlioglu in that Superpole session earlier on today. Everyone, including Toprak himself, thought he had pole position until Jonathan Ray's stupendous final sector. He managed to pull it out of the bag and take P1. Scott Redding was half a second back from Jonathan Ray, and actually cut a frustrated figure with that because he clearly felt that there was more on the table. As far as the championship in 2021, it's Jonathan Ray who leads us, 37 points clear. He's on 243 points, the championship leader again in 2021. Picked up 39 points on main rival Toprak over the course of the Dutch round 2 weeks ago, more than recovering his losses from what could easily have been a costly race 2-fall in Donington Park.
Yeah, and that's the thing for Toprak, is that the crash with Gerloff into turn 1 at Assen is going to be a costly one for him, because Jonathan Ray doesn't tend to make that many mistakes. He made one at Donington already this season. We haven't tended to see him make too many more than that over the last few years, so you need to be able to take advantage of his mistakes without making too many of your own.
Utterly dominant in Superpoles for 2021.
Yeah, for a rider that in the past was talked about as being just, a little bit weak in qualifying, he's really made that into a strength, and we've seen some other riders really adapt to the Q tyre over the course of the last year as well.
35 championship points down after 2 rounds in 2021. He worked incredibly hard to lead, as we said, after Donington Park. But after being grounded by stablemate Garrett Gerloff in Assen, Toprak Razgatlioglu has even more work to do this time. 37 points back on series leader Ray.
Yeah, look at that in the run into turn 1 as well here at Most. You can see for Toprak, as we've seen how many times, how many circuits over the last few years, so much confidence and strength on the break point. Into turn 1 here at Most, that's going to be key as well, because this is the overtaking spot around this track, and certainly for Toprak, he's going to give himself that opportunity if he has to attack. The one thing about it is, if you can hit the front, you can try and control the race around here.
Yes, and the rumour says that rear tyre never hit the ground again after that. That was absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, for Toprak, he's always on one wheel. It's always wheelies on the exit, stoppies on the entry. But he does manage to save a bit of tyre wear like that.
Scott Redding, a comfortable 3rd in the championship after the likes of Lowe's, Rinaldi and Gerloff dropped major points last time out in Assen. Now 85 points back from Jonathan Ray, though, and that's more than he ever was behind in 2020.
Yeah, Scott a bit more smiley now compared to at the end of the Superpole session, when his frustrations got the better of him. He was caught out by the yellow flags at the end of that session, and we did see him really vent his frustration on his cool down lap, and then even in Parc Fermé a few minutes later whenever we were talking to him.
And not too much more to say about that than that, frankly. Scott Redding managing to get up onto the front row with his, what would have been probably his 2nd best time, still good enough. And I suspect that that's a good enough launch pad for him to challenge for podium places here.
I think it's one of those ones where Scott needs to look at the positives from it as well. He was one of the few riders that was forced to do a 2nd lap in a Q tyre. He was still fast enough for the front row of the grid. That bodes well for today's race.
Garrett Gerloff probably glad he's got that Yamaha contract in for 2022, because he can't be the most popular man in blue at present. His Instagram comments alone have never been so full of Turkish fans after his first turn incident with Toprak Razgatlioglu. Unfortunately for Gerloff, it's prior incidents that have made that latest misdemeanor a big talking point in the Superbike paddock. Yeah,
it's a culmination of incidents, and in any case for Gerloff, all of the isolated incidents you can kind of understand, with the exception of last time out in Assen. There's only one rider that he needed to avoid in the run into turn 1, and he hit him. He hit Toprak, hit Yamaha's title contender, took him out of contention, and he had to then face the music from that. And Garrett's been a little bit quieter this weekend. We haven't seen as much from him outside the GRT pit box, but now we'll wait and see whether or not he's learned the lessons from it when we go into this race as well. He needs to make sure he's mistake-free all the way through this weekend.
Now, as for riders starting further back down the order, Michael Ruben Rinaldi will line up P8. The Italian, who inherited 2nd place in the Superpole race, of course, last time out after Razgatlioglu and Locatelli were demoted with post-race penalties. Otherwise, little to shout about in Assen, really, for the Italian, and we have to look back to Mazzano for his best round of this season. Yeah,
it's been an up-and-down season for Michael Ruben Rinaldi. If you think to Estoril, he made a step forward. Mazzano, who's obviously right at the front of the field, able to win races. But other than that, it's been a little bit on the quiet side.
Yes, Rinaldi then will line up from the third row of the grid, still within striking distance if he's got the race pace.
Yeah, and for Rinaldi, you can always expect him to be able to make that super soft compound tyre work. That could be a big advantage today during the course of this race. We don't know what the tyres are going to be like during this race.
No, 22 laps ahead of us, and it is a voyage into the unknown around this circuit. We've said it previously. That's our prediction for what the overtaking hotspots are, and our best guesses, and the teams and the riders, of course, have got a slightly more educated guess, but they're the ones who are going to know what they're going to need to do over the course of the race distance here today. And the man who certainly judged things perfectly last time out, Andrea Locatelli. What a Dutch round it was.
For Andrea, you can see there in the Yamaha pit box, if he has another weekend like he had in Assen, he's probably going to have a sponsor on the top of that hat pretty soon again. But for Locatelli, last year in the Supersport class, we saw how much of a class act he was, and now's his chance to really just show that once again here on the Superbike. We saw in Estoril, the Yamaha was good, he was good. We saw in Assen, the Yamaha was good, he was good. The Yamaha looks good this weekend as well, and he's been able to qualify really well on the second row of the grid.
Alex Lowe's due to make his 40th Superbike start since joining Kawasaki this afternoon, and there will be plenty more to follow. The 30-year-old renewing his contract with the manufacturer at least for 2022, and as it's officially a multi-year deal, you can assume there are options for both to continue on beyond that as well, and it's a match made in heaven at this stage. Good news for both parties.
Yeah, there was a little bit of rumours up and down the paddock about whether or not Lowe's would stay with Kawasaki, but really for him it makes a lot of sense to stay there. For Kawasaki, that stability makes a lot of sense as well.
Tough season in general in 2021 for Honda. Leon Haslam doing a good job in the Superpole session earlier on today. He will line up from P7, and it is the 5th time in 6 rounds that he's beaten teammate Alvaro Bautista for single lap pace. Yeah, and
Haslam under pressure as well for his ride for next season. Honda obviously are going to be looking at what they're going to do for the future going forward. We heard from the team manager Leon Camier yesterday that they are evaluating their options and seeing what they can do, but certainly for the likes of Leon Haslam, now's a really important weekend. Try and just give yourself a really good result. He's done well in the Superpole session, qualifying on the third row of the grid. Like you said, he's always been faster than Bautista over a single lap, but over the course of the race distances, Bautista manages to make that tyre work, gives himself good opportunities.
Talking about contract negotiations, and there are plenty of top-line rides up for grabs in the remainder of this season as far as booking your passage to 2022 is concerned, because we know that there are 2 rides up for grabs potentially at Honda. Michael van der Mark's locked in at BMW, but Tom Sykes far from certain of staying there for another season. Only Yamaha and Kawasaki look pretty much settled as far as what they're doing for next season, pending confirmation, of course, as far as Yamaha are concerned, because Locatelli and Nazane are expected to stay, but that hasn't officially been announced as yet.
Yeah, it'd be a surprise if there was changes in those Yamaha seats, and certainly for Honda, you could well see some changes. There's been quite a few rider managers in and out of the Honda garages and trucks over the course of the last few rounds, people talking to those teams, and certainly the same for BMW riders being linked with that seat, and that's where it's really important for the likes of Tom Sykes we see here to have a good strong result here in race 1, give himself the best chance he has of being able to keep himself in those top 5 points paying positions in the championship.
BMW and even Ducati as well. There's desirable rides still available for next season.
Well, there's one rider that's going to be on the top of some wish lists for next year, Chaz Davis. A lot of experience as a factory rider, and a rider that wants to be on one of the better bikes on the grid. He's obviously been with Ducati for a long time, switched to the Go 11 squad for this year. Hasn't worked out well for Chaz Davis so far. Obviously, that injury as well for his shoulder has held him back quite a bit over the course of the last few rounds. But if you're Honda and you've got the option of looking at a rider like Chaz Davis that's had so much success in this championship in the past, maybe he's an option you look at. If you're BMW, you've already tried and rolled the dice on him in the past whenever he stepped up from being a Supersport world champion. He did a season on a BMW as well, so certainly for both of those manufacturers, he could be a rider that's on the list.
As riders make their way round towards the grid with 2 minutes until pit lane close, a bit of an opportunity to go through the rider order. A few different names and a few new faces as far as 2021 is concerned. Tati Mercado unfortunately ruled out with a positive COVID-19 test, so his place being taken by Alessandro Del Bianco. We've got Christophe Ponson back in the field this weekend after sitting out the previous round. Jonas Folger returns from from his injury after a crash last time out in Assen. Luca Myers, unfortunately unfit to return to action this weekend, although he does hope to be back as swiftly as possible. And Eugene Laverty's spell on the sidelines continues as well, as his RC Squadra Corsa outfit attempts to regroup to come back stronger later in the campaign.
Yeah, we'll see a couple of weeks off before the next round in Navarra, so we'll see if any of those riders are back on the grid for that. But certainly, as it is now, it's still a big field, 23 rider field here this weekend in Most, and I'm quite keen to see how quite a few riders adapt during the course of this race. The Yard riders, of course, coming in as wildcards, Marvin Fritz and Karel Hanneke. If they're able to finish inside the top 10, really good performance from them, and they could be worth keeping an eye on as the race progresses.
Yes, both Fritz and Hanneke, the Yacht Endurance riders in regular circumstances, making one-off appearances this weekend, and both immediately on the pace right from the start of Friday. They've qualified 12th and 13th, and the team's target at the start of this weekend was to pick up points. And one rider we haven't mentioned, Jason Uribe, making his World Championship debut, former Moto America rider amongst several other competitions, including CV in the past. He joins Loris Cresson, teammate to Loris Cresson, for the remainder of 2021 as a replacement for Samuele Cavalieri. So that's all the bits and bobs done, and now we're going to go through the 23 riders on the grid, starting from pole. And the man who owns pole position these days in 2021 is our championship leader, Jonathan Rea. I mentioned previously his championship score of 243 points. That is exactly the same score he had after the same number of races last season. 37 points clear of his nearest rival, Raz Gatlioglu, in 2021. Hat-trick a fortnight ago in Assen, leaving him on 8 wins for the season.
Yeah, that consistency has been the bedrock of Jonathan Rea's title challenges over the last 6 years, and once again it shows just how difficult it is to beat him. If he's able to match it after those 15 races, it shows week in, week out that he's been able to get the most out of himself and that bike over the last few years, and that's never been in doubt. But the fact now that he qualifies so well, it's just given him an extra string to his bow. As
I said previously, the top 3 in the World Championship standings line up in their championship order on the front row. Scott Redding will line up from P3. 2 podiums from his last 10 races, both second place finishes in Assen. In his debut season, he never went more than 6 races without a win. He's 11 races without in 2021.
Yeah, and for Redding, he'll know that getting back to winning races is what he has to do. He's been fast all the way through this weekend. Actually quite enjoys the Moss circuit, riding it in the dry conditions. He says a lot of fun. It's a good layout. There's a good grip to the asphalt as well. But over the course of 22 laps, it can be very different compared to riding on your own.
Between Rea and Redding is Raz Gatlioglu. His run of 20 consecutive scoring finishes brought to an end in galling fashion at the first turn of race 2 last time out. Crucially, he's been defeated by Jonathan Rea in 10 of the 15 races in 2021 so far. That is where the points deficit comes from.
Yeah, and for Toprak, we've been able to see that he's made big steps forward this year. Very consistent week in, week out, track to track. And he's even made a step forward in the wet conditions as well. We saw that this weekend even, whenever he was able to set really good times in free practice too.
6 out of 6 in 2021 for Jonathan Rea, and the first rider to achieve 6 consecutive pole positions since Tom Sykes in 2013. Rea certainly becoming the modern age Mr. Superpole. Sykes is a couple of years without finishing, 1.5 years now, without finishing in pole position at the end of a Superpole session. So it's Rea, Raz Gatlioglu and Redding, the top 3 in the champion grid. Behind them, Tom Sykes, Garrett Gerloff and Andrea Locatelli. Sykes, who showed real frustration at the Dutch round as Superpole misfortune really compromised his whole weekend. Excellent at Donington Park. Just starting to see the fruits of his 2 previous campaigns on BMW machinery. And I think we can head down to the grid with Anthony Nelson.
Cheers, Alex. Tom, it's 4th on the grid here. And what we've heard here from yesterday and this morning is that it looks like a track where it might be really difficult to overtake, aside from turn 1 here. So what's the focus going to be in these first opening laps?
Yeah, overtaking. No, yeah, joking aside, it's like I said, luckily, you know, for me, I've got a decent qualifying because it is quite one line here. The only thing for me is getting the start. Unfortunately, been struggling with the starts on the M1000 RR. So my biggest issue for now is getting off the line good. Apart from that, I think it's going to be a very, very mixed bag of tyres today. So let's see what happens.
Best luck, Tom.
Cheers, thank you.
Garrett Gerloff lines up alongside Tom Sykes here from P5. 12 points in Assen last time out, his lowest scoring weekend of this season so far. Still enough to take him on to 105 points, more than he managed in the whole of his rookie season with GRT.
Yeah, his lowest point scoring weekend, probably his highest profile weekend though, so that's where he needs to really keep his head down this weekend, have incident-free running here in race 1 and just move on from what happened in Assen.
24-year-old Andrea Locatelli, by contrast, enjoyed a breakthrough weekend in Assen that culminated in his first Superbike podium. Of course, it could have been 2, but for an unfortunate post-race penalty in the Superpole race.
Yeah, and I think Locatelli's made big steps forward at different times through this season. Estoril, the second round, the Yamaha was working really well. He made a step forward. Last time out in Assen, though, massive step forward. He could have easily come away with 2 podiums.
Third row of the grid will feature Leon Haslam, Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Alex Lowes. Honda really still struggling in 2021. This time last season, Bautista and Haslam were 8th and 10th. They're currently 11th and 13th, and Haslam has never previously found himself this far down the pecking order. 5 scoring rides in the last 6 races, though. He has at least been consistent.
Yeah, and for Haslam, we've seen Astrid and his teammate Bautista over a single lap, but during the course of the races, it's hard for him to keep Bautista at bay. Bautista able to manage his tyre really well, manage his performance all the way through a race, and that has been his big advantage.
Jonathan Rea making his way towards the grid. He will start from first position once again, and that's been the bedrock of his challenges for major points to extend his series lead in this 2021 campaign. By contrast, we've talked about Michael Ruben Rinaldi as being pretty inconsistent, although to his credit, the Italian's only conceded 4 points to teammate Scott Redding over the last 3 rounds. 4 podiums in that period, 3 of them, of course, dating back to Mazzano. He sits 5th overall, and that's his best ever Superbike ranking.
Yeah, and I think for Rinaldi, we have been able to see that this season again, he has made a step forward compared to where he was last year. Obviously, jumping onto a factory seat, a lot more pressure, and he's been able to have some good performances at Mazzano, but he'll know that he needs to make another step forward now. 5
races without a top 5 finish and only 1 podium since Aragon for Alex Lowes, who was only 3 points behind Scott Redding in the battle for 3rd, leaving Donington Park. Now trails by 35 after an improved weekend from the Ducati man.
Yeah, and I think certainly for Lowe's going to be important to be able to come through at the start, pick off a few riders, and then see if you can manage that tyre all the way through. Tyre selection is going to be crucial this weekend for riders.
4th row of the grid, we line up with Axel Bassani, Alvaro Bautista and Marvin Fritz, the surprise package. Axel Bassani here, 7 top 10 finishes in the last 3 rounds. Really creditable rookie campaign. He says that there is still more to come, and you wouldn't bet against him proving it. 60 points from 5 rounds so far for Axel Bassani, the best finish of 6th place in the Superpole race at the Emilia-Romagna round, the 3rd round of this 2021 campaign, and his home round, of course, Axel Bassani. So Bassani lining up from P10 alongside him, as we've said previously, Alvaro Bautista. He's the man who's had the long run pace as far as race trim is concerned, the ability to use that tyre more gently and to make it last the distance. Not one of the longest laps on the calendar, although it is one of the twistiest circuits, and we expect the asphalt to be demanding on the tyres, as well as that some of those heavy braking zones to be demanding on the brakes. Bautista, one of the very few in the field who has visited this venue before, in his case for the European 125cc Championship. That was almost 2 decades ago and will be of scant help. But a season's best 5th place last time out, certainly bringing him into the weekend in a confident mood. The one thing Bautista said was that he remembered turn 1, but it's been changed since he was last here, so not particularly helpful for him. Marvin Fritz it is who completes row number 4. And as far as Fritz is concerned, coming in this weekend, and a rare opportunity to show what he's all about at this World Championship level. Of course, regular in endurance competition, and Yacht sending out 2 wildcard riders here, and the other is Karel Hanneke, who will be starting from P13. But for Fritz, 2016 German Superbike champion, a World Championship debut, as I said, 28 years of age, and season number 4 for him with Yacht. As for Karel Hanneke, we see him here, 25 years of age, and representative of the Czech Republic, a familiar face in this paddock. Made a couple of successful Supersport appearances last season, made his Superbike debut back in 2018 for Guandolini Racing, scoring points in both of his outings. That was at Laguna Seca in the middle middle of that campaign. Alessandro Del Bianco will line up from P14. I mentioned Del Bianco coming in as a replacement for Tati Mercado. First World Superbike weekend since Qatar 2019 for Del Bianco at the end of a season on the Altea Honda. Since then, he's focused on the Italian Championship, and he's currently third there after a spectacular photo finish with Michele Pirro in Misano last weekend. Completing row number 5 is Tito Rabat, who lines up, as I said, from P15, 32 years of age, made a noticeable step forward for race pace in Assen, and his team principal Marco Barnabo says progress should transfer to other circuits as well. This weekend will therefore be the acid test. Those are your top 15 runners on the grid. Another opportunity then to nip down to the grid with Anthony.
Cheers, Alex and Danny, with Andrew here alongside Andrea Locatelli. And Andrew, it's perhaps the hottest we've had all weekend. We didn't get any running in the afternoon yesterday. Andrea's a rider who likes to go on the SAX quite a lot, which is works in the conditions. But how difficult is it right now to make that choice?
Yeah, difficult choice for sure. But, you know, I think everyone's been on the X this year at every race. The 2 different versions of the X. Was only Assen that Locker felt, well, we both felt we could get to the end of the race, and he just about got to the end. So this is the temperature for the X, the track temperature now, but again, we've got no experience on it, so tough decision.
How's Andrea feeling going into this?
He'll be okay, as long as we can get everyone can keep their heads through the first turn. It should be a good race, I think, and I think he can be strong at the end.
Best of luck.
So a couple of big names lining up from the 6th row of the grid here. We just saw Chaz Davies, who will start from 16th position, well down the order for him. And Michael van der Mark, after 2 strong Superpoles in the last 2 rounds, he's got a lot of work to do here. Average 5th in the round in Assen. He's now leading his seesaw battle with 2021 teammate Tom Sykes by a couple of points as well. Those 2 BMWs evenly matched.
Yeah, a couple of points between them, and